Hi, everyone, and welcome to our weekly broadcast with Sam Savage. We call it ChanceTALK, and thank you for joining this. As you join in this broadcast, say hello in the comments. This is live, so we have this ability, amazing technology to communicate to one another. Please say hello in the comments so we see you, and maybe mention where you're watching from. I know people it will take a few seconds for people to join the stream and start watching this. So don't be shy. Say hello. I know there are dozens of you watching already on LinkedIn. We wanted to start with some useful announcements. As you probably know, we're on the finishing stretch for the Risk Awareness Week, which starts on 17th of October and goes until 21st of October. A lot of workshops are planned. Each of the days has its own theme. Day one is about the need to move from deterministic to stochastic, or what I call risk management 2. And Sam, you're doing a workshop called the ChanceAge, moving from single point scenarios to ranges and distributions. And then each of the following days, and obviously we have amazing workshops from Doug. We have workshops from second day is dedicated to psychology of risk taking, so the cognitive biases and the kind of the neuroscience behind appreciating risks. Day 3 is all about quantitative risk analysis. We have Justin from Highmark Health doing a very nice presentation. We have obviously Tom Keelan or introducing the meta log distribution as the kind of the next evolution of quantitative risk analysis. And we have Sam, you doing the second workshop where you kind of try and bring it all together, practical guide to measuring probability of achieving objectives. Day 4 is all about effective mitigation, and Max is doing a really nice workshop there. Then Brian and I are doing a very nice demonstration on how a mitigation, uh, how to recalculate risk exposure given the effect of the mitigation and how to justify the value of mitigation. So that will be very interesting. Robert, and I'm just listing the people who are connected to probabilitymanagement.org. Robert, and maybe I hope I didn't forget anybody, and I don't think I did. Robert is doing a really nice demonstration with models and everything on how to optimize cybersecurity control decisions. Then Shane Kavanagh and myself are talking about kind of continuing this journey on cyber risk. Once we build the loss exceedance curve, the risk profile for the cyber risk, we will talk about packaging this information for the insurance markets and saving millions of dollars on not overpaying for the for the cyber insurance and building models on par or better than actuaries actually use within insurance companies. And day 5 is all about reporting, integrating into performance management, risk-adjusted performance, and monitoring. I don't think there's anyone that is connected to probabilitymanagement.org, but obviously every presentation, because I spent a lot of effort trying to make sure it's all connected in the overall theme of moving towards better quantitative, transparent, auditable risk analysis. All of the presentations are kind of on the same has the same overall message. Now, I've been talking for quite a lot, so I suspect a lot of people have now joined us. Do say hello in the comments, and please write where you're watching this from. And then 1 second. Let me just reload the page. Sam, you have regular exciting events as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about what's happening in
Sure,
September, October, November, and December?
sure. So I'm giving a two-part webinar series through the nonprofit. Um, the series is called "Welcome to the Chance Age," and there are two webinars. The first one is "Give Chance a Chance," which just means wake up and smell the uncertainty. And the second one is called the probability power grid. So let's talk about giving chance a chance. I need to define the ChanceAge for you. Currently, if there's an uncertainty, like what is demand going to be next month, or what are our losses over here? The boss comes in and says, give me a number. And you say, boss, it's uncertain. I mean, would you settle for an average? And the boss says, well, if it's all you can give me. And so you give them a single number, an average. Let me just point out that if the uncertainty were like, rolling a die, then that's like giving them a flat die with 3.5 dots on each side. That's ridiculous. That leads to the flaw of averages. In the ChanceAge, when the boss says, give me a number, you say, what do you want it to be? Here are your chances. And people are not doing that. And yet today we have the technology to do it. It is amazing. Alex is sort of part of this movement, and I call it chanceification because it's doing for probability what Edison and Westinghouse did for electricity. Anyway, that's what that's about. And I do want to just share that other screen on my side. If you're interested in attending, here's what to remember. ChanceAge.com will get you to the webinar series. And I don't know how many of the people out there have played the game of Go. Wonderful game. I originated in China or Japan, I forget which. Alex, have you ever played Go?
I have not.
Oh boy. So it's this game of connections, basically. You got to
invented in China. Yep.
Okay, great. So you got this board where you can put down stones of different colors. And it's got squares, but you don't play on the squares, you play on the intersections, which is interesting. Anyway, you put down stones, and the idea, it's a very statistical game. You want to go for parts of the board where there are not a lot of stones, statistically speaking, and it's because two people are duking it out and trying to strangle each other. Well, the interesting thing from that perspective is that the word chance in that big Go board in natural language space, the word chance is underpopulated. So, for example, we've got this wonderful thing called ChanceTALK. Well, ChanceTALK was available for $9.95. And, the name of this show, ChanceTALK, $9.95. It really represents a new era. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's the age of chance. No, ageofchance.com was taken. Then I looked up Bronze Age. Bronze Age, this is at GoDaddy, right, where I buy my. Yep. Bronze Age was $50,000. And then I looked up ChanceAge. It was $9.95. So I bought it. Whoa. And there are a lot of other things like this. So it represents a new world. You're going to see some of those things today, including some very exciting stuff that is going on at a hedge fund in New York that's getting into this space. And so anyway, but the webinar, if you go to chanceage.com, I am giving these webinars tomorrow and Thursday. It's a 2-part one. So sign up today. Oh, there's a discount code, right?
There's a special discount for Risk Academy and Risk Awareness participants. If you use the keyword or the code 5RISK, it's a 5% discount on the webinar. So by all means,
and by the way, yes, and you will get a copy of the full version of ChanceTALK and discounts on other software that we have at our site as well. So in fact, if you exercised if you took the free software and then the discounts on the other, the webinar is roughly free. But so that is taking place tomorrow and the next day.
Exactly.
So and Alex, you're just back now from Florida, and you at a risk conference.
Yeah. I spent a week in Miami at the Archers US Summit. It was a very enjoyable event, and I think a lot of let me try and summarize very quickly the kind of the two or three key takeaways for me. The first takeaway was I think there's a lot of I don't know if there's a lot of interest, but I think it's now becoming an unavoidable realization that quantifying risk has so many benefits and upside in supporting your decisions that people are beginning to lean towards quantification as opposed to qualitative risk assessments, which weren't that made pretty pictures but weren't particularly insightful
Right.
in making decisions. So I think there's this tendency towards quantification, which is good news for everyone in the world of risk management. And but my first takeaway was that most of the things in quantitative risk is not really innovation. It's been around for decades. And all the companies that want to switch from qualitative to quantitative risk analysis, they don't have to start from scratch because there are templates, models, methodologies, standards built on most of the risks out there. So you don't have to recreate the wheel. You just have to find a person or a non-for-profit or an organization that has done this before, and then you can basically apply the same math and the rules. And so that was the first takeaway, which I think people really appreciated, that a, very high probability for most of the risks you can think of. There's a kind of a technique, a model that has already been designed, back tested, and validated, and it performs better than intuitive subjective risk assessments. So that was the big takeaway. The second big takeaway for me was that the approach that have been trialed and tested in banks could work really nicely for non-financial companies and governments as well. And let me kind of explain what I mean by this approach. There are in banks there are three levels of risk analysis. It's called basic, standardized, and advanced. And basic basically means, for some, like for operational risk, it means take 15% of your average for the last 3 years turnover, and that's your risk exposure. And then standardized is use some sort of like predetermined template calculator to figure out what your risk exposure is. And then advanced is basically build a tailor-made model specifically designed for your problem, and then you'll figure out what the real risk exposure is, or at least you'll narrow the uncertainty a little bit. You won't narrow it completely, but you'll narrow it a little bit. And I think everything we've talked to you with you, Sam, about is there are generators and users. I think users can actually still benefit from the basic approach. And there is like, you can, for example, this is what Doug Hubbard has been promoting for years. Anybody can turn their deterministic risk register into a stochastic risk register. That's technically quite easy, and SIPMath can do it, and any software can kind of do that part. That's the easy part. And then the generators, you need the generators a little upfront to create the calculators for the standardized approach. And then, of course, you need the generators full time to create tailor-made, quite sophisticated models. But by the time you get to the advanced models, you can kind of live for years and get a lot of value from even the first two levels of approach. So those are my key takeaways from the conference, which I thought was really fun.
Well, I want to comment on both of those. Let's go back to the first. The first is, well, all these things like existed. We have to reinvent the wheel. So think of an important invention for the industrial age. Anything. The light bulb.
Yep.
The internal combustion engine. And you think, oh yeah, all this stuff happened around 1895, Nope. It all happened around 1825 in England, right? And it took that long. It took, 80 years for this stuff to develop to the point that everybody could use it. right?
To commercialize, basically.
I mean, to industrialize it or something. I mean,
Yes,
whatever the
yes,
word
yes,
is,
yes.
to
Yep,
implement it, right?
yep.
So this is exactly what's going on in the probability management space. Is that we have standardized ways. Let's just go back to the wheel. Oh, the wheel was invented a long time ago. Yeah, but the idea of putting it on a railroad car, more recent. Then the idea that you'll make the railroad tracks all the same gauge so you can get from anywhere to anywhere else is even more recent. Apparently the Australians didn't do that until, I don't know, fairly. Okay,
Yep.
that's the progression we're seeing here, right? And when it comes to the second one about the banks, I actually like to focus more on financial engineering, because that's really the origins of what probability management has become. So probability management has to do really with standardizing the communication of vectors of Monte Carlo realizations, and that really came from financial engineering and insurance and other places. So what I want to talk about today is this thing that is enabled. It's enabled by probability management, and I refer to this as modular risk management. We're using it all sorts of places. This particular application comes out of some really interesting work I've been doing with an outfit down in San Diego called Level 4 Ventures. And we've been looking at the risk modeling of the utilities in California, actually, which is a big deal because there have been several sort of disastrous outcomes with pipelines blowing up and towns burning down because of wildfires, because of high tension lines. But the risk regulation, a lot of it is based on an important but ridiculous definition of risk. That risk is the likelihood of failure times the consequence of failure. Oh, right. There's 1 chance in 10 of killing someone. Ah, well, that's 1/10 of a fatality. Right. What if there's 1 chance in 1,000 of killing 100 people? Oh, that's 0.1 fatalities. What if there's 1 chance in 79 billion of killing everybody on Earth? That's 0.1 fatalities. What if you roll a die? Oh, you get one of these every time. 3.5 No, that is ridiculous. And that is where much of risk management still exists. And that is just it's just too bizarre. And just as we're talking here about the risk of killing everyone on Earth, you may know that yesterday there was an experiment done to prevent that from happening. We slammed this DART rocket thing into an asteroid to see if we could move it. Now, by the way, there is a pretty common argument that we should not waste any money trying to fix climate change because we don't even know if we've caused it. Okay, that's a valid point of view, but the people who have that point of view then must just be irate that we're wasting taxpayer dollars to try to deflect asteroids from destroying the Earth. I can promise you we didn't create the asteroids. I know that for sure. Climate change, the jury is out. We might be causing that, but the asteroids, no. So if you really believe we shouldn't try to fix things that we didn't cause, claw your tax dollars back so we can't try to divert those asteroids. Okay, enough of that. What do I mean by modular risk management? Well, a colleague of mine at Stanford, wonderful economist, passed away in 2005, said that to get a large model to work, you have to start with a small model that works, not a large model that doesn't work.
Which is, it's so painful for me to read this, because in my team I had a couple of mathematicians, and one of them just did not get that idea. He was always trying to build the most sophisticated comprehensive model, which obviously never worked for the first time, and then he was trying to spend days figuring out why it didn't work instead of building an MVP.
Right. Absolutely. It reminds me, when I used to teach computer science, students would come in, some giant computer program, say, why doesn't this work? It's like, it would take me weeks. Okay, anyway, so typical risk models look like sandcastles. But why is this? Well, you've got something like, say, world oil price, which is going to affect all these different aspects of your organization. Oh my God, it goes into the fertilizer I'm making. It goes into the energy of the, power. And to do that coherently, so somewhere you'll simulate oil price and then it flows down through the rest of the model, right? And so in one sense, if you want to keep track of all these risks, this is the way people have gone. And it's obsolete before it's completed, it's inflexible, and it collapses under its own weight. So I'm going to talk instead about stochastic libraries, which are they're databases of coherent simulation trials. And that means, think about it this way. One person simulates the price of oil as a vector of trials, right? And then they distribute that to everybody else in the organization. This is what we did at Royal Dutch Shell many years ago. So this approach has been used in financial engineering and insurance, and it allows you to aggregate small risk models into enterprise risk models. Does it solve everything? No. Going back to Alex's mathematician friend, all models are wrong, as George Box said. Some models are useful. So if you're going to be wrong anyway, why don't you at least build a model that is useful as opposed to these giant sandcastles? So the trick here is to model statistical dependence between assets. And I came up with a new word for this. So LOF, likelihood of failure. Yeah, how about likelihood of simultaneous failure? You don't get that with averages. You can't even begin to look at that with averages.
Yep.
And we're worried about regulated utilities in this project I'm involved with. Well, it also improves the standardization to streamline the regulatory process. So let's look at it this way. And I'm going to show you some models made with SIPMath. But what kind of blocks do we have? Well, we've got global environmental factors. These are the things like the price of oil or the wind in a certain part of California. And so think of every Lego block. I'm assuming that folks in our audience know what Monte Carlo simulation is. Do we know how many people are on? Or
I see just under 15, and okay. I suspect all of them do know.
I suspect they all do.
But by the way, we don't have to guess. I know you're very shy, and nobody still said hello. I don't understand why, because normally you do. Write whether you know what Monte Carlo is, because we can see the comments.
And by the way, for those who don't, it's like shaking a ladder before you climb on it. Bombard something with random inputs. So first of all, in a global risk setting, we're going to have various sorts of uncertainties we need to model. And so some of them are global, right? Like everybody faces the same oil price. Everybody faces the same global warming factors and so on, right? Well, I mean, the degree to which the entire Earth warms. In the North Pole, they won't feel it the same way they do on the equator, but, you know. And then you need to model assets that are impacted by these global factors. So far, they all seem to know what Monte Carlo is. That's great.
So thank you to everybody who commented. Yes, thank you. We see that.
Thank you. So every Lego block, okay, is really a vector of Monte Carlo realizations, right? Could be thousands, tens of thousands. I want to point out, you're saying, wow, that's a lot of numbers you have to store. Yeah, well, we've now learned how to express up to 100 million Monte Carlo trials in 88 bytes. But that's another story for another day. And this is the 3.0 standard that involves Tom Keelan's Metalog and Doug's HDR generator. Very cool stuff. Anyway, back to the story. I got my global variables. Now I got local variables. Does this gas pipe blow up? Does this transmission line blow down in the wind and start another wildfire? And then there are uncertain socioeconomic factors. You know, there are people's preferences, there's GDP, there's just all kinds of things we also need to model in this framework. So I'm going to show you an actual model in which we've done this with these Lego blocks. But you got these various kinds of things. And then notice I've got a red block here now. We haven't standardized in these colors yet, but we're going to eventually. In this version, the red block is actually my portfolio, and RSE stands for risk spend efficiency. So the idea here is that if you're going to spend money mitigating risk, and if you're a utility, by the way, the money you spend mitigating, you got to pass on to your consumers. They got to pay more for electricity, right? You know, you have to think about all these things, because if you charge too much for electricity, other bad things happen. Poor people can't have it, okay? There was an initiative, I think, in some Scandinavian country, maybe Sweden, I forget where, called Vision Zero, where we are going to make sure that we have no automotive traffic fatalities. We're going to get it down to zero. Well, that meant, I don't know, no one could drive above, I'm making up these numbers, but you have to drive a lot slower. If you drive slower, it slows down the GDP. If you look at a regression of life expectancy versus GDP, there's a positive slope, which means that if you slow down the GDP, you kill people. You have to take that into account.
Yep.
Right?
The best example, can I just share because it's so illustrative. I remember, I can't remember, the safety board in US, they were investigating whether it's worth making parents pay for an extra seat on a plane for a child.
Right.
Because the risk of a child seat belt on your lap is slightly higher than the child sitting in his own individual seat. And so what they investigated found that an average price for a family would increase by $130, which would mean that a lot of families would switch to cars, and cars are so deadlier than planes, then the risk is not worth it. And so they decided against it. And so now we can still put our babies on the lap.
It's such an amazing thing. And by the way, that came out of an article by Michael Kinsley in Slate. And the beauty of that example is, as soon as you talk about the value of human life, right, people become irrational. Oh, we can't discuss that. No, we were not talking about the value of human life. The actual numbers were that if you forced people to buy an extra seat to put a car seat in for your baby on the plane, if you forced them to do that and drove the price up, as Alex pointed out, that now it's not going to drive people to taking the babies in the cars. So if you did this, if you forced them to do this, you would save one baby per decade in plane crashes, but you would kill 9 babies per decade on the highway. What it boiled down to is how many babies you want to kill? 1 or 9? Oh, that's a pretty easy choice, okay? But I actually go further than that because, hey, if the government wants to kill babies, that's their business. Go ahead. But it was going to force the price of plane tickets up, right? Anyway, by creating more demand, which means that I would have to pay more for my plane ticket. Now, I'm sorry. If the government wants to kill babies, yeah, go ahead. But wait a minute. If you're going to force me to subsidize the government killing babies, you have somehow crossed a red line there. I'm not going to help pay for killing babies, right? Wonderful example. And we got to take this stuff. Thanks for bringing that up, Alex. That's such a beautiful example. So let's look at a global map here of what I'm going to demonstrate some pieces of, okay? So in this case, we're worried about electric circuits in various places that get blown down by wind gusts and cause a bunch of damage. And by the way, I don't even have wildfires in here. Just the line blows down. And the only thing we're looking at, we're not looking at lives or anything. We're just looking at how much outage was there. So just talking about the various pieces here. Let me, oh, here I do want to, I want to find my laser pointer. Okay, so the structure here. We build models of wind gusts. And just imagine this in California, all right? And people are already doing stuff. I mean, oh boy, I got to make sure that before we run out of time, I demonstrate a website that is generating real-time wind distributions out of this hedge fund in New York. Okay, then you build coherent libraries of these global factors. And by coherent, I mean we keep track of if the wind is blowing in Northern California, maybe it's less likely to blow in Southern California. But if the wind is strong in one of 2 adjacent towns, it's got to be strong in the other one, right? And then those libraries go into a model of circuit failure for every circuit. And then those circuit failures run into another model. And here, people who like heat maps, looks like a heat map. I'll show it to you in a second. What is it? This is the likelihood of simultaneous failure. You just can't get that with averages, right? Okay. So quickly, let's show you one of these models. So here's the wind gust model. And I've got scatter plots of the wind in these various regions. Now, by the way, this is designed so that the average wind is pretty much the same everywhere, all right? But, so just to make a point, these are all kind of statistically identical places. But they're not independent. And so what I see is, here, region 1 and region 2, if I dive into this thing, oh my gosh, there's a 95% correlation. What if I set that to 0 correlation? See the little scatter plot change there? Here, Control Z, Control Y, Control Z. And you're supposed to be looking at the correlation and that scatter plot. And this is what I call limbic analytics. We're going to connect the seat of the intellect to the seat of the pants. Oh, that's what correlation means. It means the shape of the scatter plot. Well, not exactly, but it's a good start. Okay. So then we spit out the libraries from these things. And now I go to the circuit failure model. And in the circuit failure model,
We have a question from Ali.
yes, please.
What distribution would you use in this example? And talking about wind gust.
Oh, that's easy. The metalog. I'll show you in a second. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh, what a perfect
do you have a second? What time do you need to? What
Yeah,
time
yeah.
do you need to leave? Okay, good.
So hold on a second. Hold on a second. What distribution would I use? I would go out to this website where I have instantaneous wind speed distributions generated by some NOAA wind sensor. And every time I go out here, this is the thing developed by this micro prediction outfit, which is part of a hedge fund in New York. And this is 1 hour ahead stochastic wind speed. What distribution is that? Oh, it's a metalog, of course. Everything's a metalog. Again, it's the beauty of standardization. And it's the miracle of metalogs that they let us do this. Right? So there we go. There's the answer. And, oh, but just a second. While I'm here, let me copy that to the clipboard. Let's go back to Excel. Let me create a new model. Let's go to ChanceCALK. I'm going to, and let's just imagine for a second, probably easy to imagine, that the damage of wind is not related just to wind speed, but to the square of wind speed. I'm just making this up, but you know, like in physics, that's the energy is probably the square of the speed or something, right? I know in airplanes, then the drag goes up like the square of the airspeed. So, okay. Anyway, so I'm going to say, oh, I've got this instantaneous algorithmic, whatever it is, estimate of wind speed, which I'm going to stick right here in my spreadsheet. Click. Oh, we're not in Kansas anymore. Trial 1, trial 2, trial 3. Oh, but I am interested in the square of wind speed. So that thing squared. And what I'm worried about is that the square of wind speed is greater than 2, because then my lines burn down. Well, that requires another button. The chance of whatever button, and the chance that this formula is greater than 2 is 72%. Oh no! Let me tell you that in California, we have this thing called PSPS. It is a preemptive power shutoff that says, oh my gosh, conditions are so perfect for wildfire that we better shut the power off so we don't start one when the lines blow down. Okay? It's an important decision. If you make that decision when you shouldn't have, you cause $1 billion worth of economic damage or something. If you don't make the decision when you should have, you burn down the city of paradise and you kill 80 people, and it's like hundreds of billions. Pretty important decision. You suppose that having an instantaneous estimate of the distribution of wind speeds would enter that? I would think, I don't know how exactly, but I would think that might be important. Okay. So let me just quickly finish up now with, oh, let's see, I've got to pull this out. So well, I showed you, here's the model that models what various circuits will do. And then that goes into another stochastic library and into a thing that looks like a heat map, because people like heat maps. Yeah, but this is a real heat map. Here, we have the likelihood of failure running down the diagonal, but it is a likelihood of simultaneous failure, LOSF. I've never even heard of it before, but it's obvious when you hear it. Well, of course, that's what we're going to call it. And you cannot do that with average dice. Okay, well, let's look at this for a sec. Circuit 1 and circuit 2, 21% chance of simultaneous failure. Circuit 1 and circuit 3, only a 7%. And by the way, this is under the baseline. I can try various mitigations. What if we harden the lines? That is, put better insulation on it or something. Well, these drop. What if we put them underground? Whoa, that reduces everything. These all go to 0. Okay, let's look at maintenance. So why do I even care about this? Likelihood of simultaneous failure. Well, I forgot to tell you that in the event that circuit 1 and circuit 2 go down together, I completely black out the Los Angeles basin of how many? 15 million, 20? I don't know how many people are in Los. A lot of people are going to be in the dark, right? This one by itself, has as many people, as some of these others, but it isn't going to wipe out such a huge area.
13
in
million.
conjunction with something else, right? And there's a whole science behind this. There are things called minimal cut sets in networks that tell you which parts are most vulnerable. So, I mean, this is tremendously important information that you can't even smell the simultaneous failures if you don't use coherent distributions. So I think that kind of finishes my part of this sermon here.
Yeah, thank you. But I think the broader message is just as important. Instead of building one humongous model that has all the different inputs and trying to build the correlations inside one, you can actually build almost like a standalone calculators and then bring them all together. But to bring them all together, you need to make sure that they are using same distributions, same inputs.
No, not just the same distributions, the same trials of the same distributions, right?
Yes, and the
The word
relationships
is
preserved.
that they are coherent.
Yep, that's the word I was looking for.
They are coherent. And I will tell you, the original name I came up with for probability management was coherent management, but coherentmanagement.com was taken. So probability management was my second choice. But this is what it means. Probability management means managing these vectors of Monte Carlo realizations so as to maintain coherence.
Thank you. Perfect. Any questions, thoughts, ideas, suggestions for the next week webcast? Any other topics you would like us to touch on?
And we've got lots more to come. I've got to jump off to another meeting. It's
Sure.
always fun, Alex.
I'll stay around for a few seconds to answer any questions.
See you next time, Alex. Bye-bye.
See you next week. Thanks, Sam. Bye. All right. Any final thoughts, questions, anything you wanted to discuss? Again, reminder that 2020 2022 Risk Awareness Week starts in a couple of weeks. And by the way, as every year, there's free access, and there's also paid access. A lot of workshops, very practical this year, like always. Michelle Worker just joined, the author of a very, very popular book, Grey Rhino. Just joined the speaker board, and I'm really looking forward to her workshop. Don't forget to support the victims of the war in Ukraine. And quick reminder, in 3 days, the prices will go up. In 3 days and 3 hours and 59 minutes, the prices will go up a bit. So, if you're interested, if you really need the CPD certificate of attendance, and you want to get access to Raw 21 replays, and you want to have access to all of the workshops, not just the free ones, then by all means sign up. A lot of partners are supporting us. Don't forget the dates. 17th to 21st of October. Now, Mohammed, thank you. Risk appetite. I'll talk to Sam on how we can kind of weave that in. Maximilian, Lex, what's Lex? Loss exceedance curves and risk tolerances. Is that what you mean? Basically limiting. So kind of the same overall theme as Mohammed. And do tell me if I got your message correctly. Lex is loss exceedance curve, so basically just risk profiles. Sure, that sounds like a worthwhile conversation. What else? Okay, Ali, thank you for sharing. What would you like us to discuss around that? Thanks, Maximilian. I see your response. Any other suggestions? Keep them coming. Any other topics you would like us to discuss? Okay. No more comments. So thank you, and I'll see you next week. Okay. Thanks, Ali. I see your comments. I'll take that offline. I'll think about it, and we'll talk about it next week, because I don't really have a ready answer for you. Nice, Maximilian. Going over a risk roll-up model would be good. Roll-up in what sense? Same risk across different entities, or different risks into a liquidity model. There are basically kind of two ways, which I'm sure you're all well aware of. You can take a cash flow model and just integrate all sorts of uncertainties and risk events into that. So that's one way of risk roll up. And then the other way is you can get loss exceedance curves for specific risks and risk instances at different plants or business units, and then you can aggregate those risk exposures. But both can technically be done. I'm a much bigger fan of the first approach, where you take the decision model and then you integrate the risks into the decision model, only the risks that are relevant for that decision. But I think we can discuss more on that next week. Thanks, Tiago. ESG mess. What do you mean by that? On top of, and I don't know if you've seen that. I wrote an article on the Risk Academy blog. And by the way, if anybody hasn't really signed up for Risk Academy blog, do. It's one of the most popular risk management blogs out there. And I read an article which was called ESG is the worst thing to happen to risk management since GRC. And I attempt to present quite compelling arguments on why, even though saving environment and planet is super critical, going via the ESG path was probably not a very good idea, and there are much better ways of achieving the same. And I bring a lot of mathematical arguments for that as well. Um, so happy to discuss that, but it would make a lot more sense if you read the article, if you haven't done so already, and then kind of follow it up with a more specific question. Okay, thanks, Maximilian. Got it. I will do my best not to forget. I'll save all of these messages and communicate to Sam so we can prepare for next week. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you at the Risk Awareness Week. I'll see you next week first. Sam will see you at his webinars. I know some of you have participated in the webinars in the past, and I'll definitely see you at the Risk Awareness Week. As of today, we have 2,036 people registered. Which is a small portion of what it will be by the time it actually starts, because I don't know, I don't know why, I don't get it, but people exponentially start signing up just before the conference, which is weird to me because I usually try and prefer and put something in my calendar long in advance. But anyway, thank you, and I'll see you next week.